Guys, I thought I'd do another quick tutorial on using watercolors, and this one will be my favorite way of using watercolors, which is actually using Ecoline liquid watercolors. I like these because they're cheap. You can use cheap paper with them and they're still going to be vibrant and show up. Because you need to use less water with them, you don't have to wait so long between layers drying and you can add more layers. So these are not very light fast. You're better off using professional grade watercolors if you're worried about that. But it's worth noting that anything you make with water medium, you should be using UV glass when you're framing it and keeping it away from the light, so that's going to hold still. But I like these because I can just do a lot of experiments with them. And then if I like something, I can come back in with more expensive supplies. So I'm going to be using Ecoline 580, so a blue, 374, which is a tan color. Let's see, 416, sepia essentially, and then for little areas of local value, a peach color. You can use like an alizarin crimson or any other red you already have in watercolors if you don't want to get, more than 3 colors. And also a 407, which is kind of like a burnt sienna color for the areas that are kind of closest to the light on the reference. And I'm using a black and white reference and identifying different planes of the face by using an Asaro head model reference, which I'll provide a link to. Okay, and one more I forgot. I'm using indigo as well. And for scale, this is about the size of my hand. I'm just doing that because it fits within the camera better, so the video quality is better if I work smaller. But I would recommend working larger with watercolors because you have more space for the ink to bleed into, or the watercolors to bleed into. So just to note on the reference, I'm using a black and white photograph of a woman, which I'm not sure about copyright, so I'm not showing it. But if you'd like to have a reference, I'm also using this Asaro head. A link to the website is underneath it. You can basically take a reference in black and white and simply place the head. You can move it around so that it's at the same angle of your own reference, and then use those light planes to help identify features within your reference that you want to highlight. And here, if you want to just stop here, is the base drawing next to the Asaro head, which I've turned in the same direction. Okay, so to start, I'm drawing an angle for the outside of the head, the chin, and a line showing where the eyebrows, bottom of nose, and bottom of lips are going to be. I'm then carving out the nose, so I'm looking at volume. So I'm carving out the eyebrows here, and I'm starting with the nose because I can organize the features around it. So one nostril down, I'm going to mark out where the highlight is, and then move up from the side of the nostril to locate where the eye is going to be. The inner corners of the eyes are aligned with the sides of the nostrils. I'm looking on both sides to place the eyes, making sure that the eyelids are consistent from side to side, and I'm marking out a little highlight for the pupil of the eye because I want to make sure that I'm protecting my highlights at all costs when I start to paint. Okay, so now I'm going to start moving down from the nose with a philtrum, and this is going to help me locate where the lips are. So those two edges form the Cupid's bow of the lips, and I'm mapping out the volume of the lips, bearing in mind that as the lip moves away from me, it's going to be truncated. It's going to be shorter on the side. And it's going to expand as it moves towards the eye that's closest to us. I'm marking out that little dimple underneath the lips on the chin. And I'm also going to mark out the chin, so I'm taking some time to be careful with this. That little line I've put there is showing where the shadow's going to be. And now I'm marking out the jawline, the edge of the face. And here I'm moving into the highlight on the cheekbone. So I'm marking that out just to make sure that I keep that space clear. I'm also going to mark out a highlight on the inner corner of the eye, on the nose, and the highlight on the angle of the forehead. So one side is facing towards the light, one side's facing away. I'm just making it really simple. Moving in with a few strands of hair now, I'm just looking at the basic volume of the hair, so really general shapes. The reference I'm using has really curly hair. I'm going to try and simplify that just a little bit as I move around the face. So just getting down a few locks of hair. Moving in with the neck. and identifying where the ear is going to be by looking at the eyebrows and the bottom of the nose. So if you get that angle down, you can place the ears. And I'm just marking out the highlighted area of the ear. That's the lower lobe that's going to be in the light. The rest of the ear is going to be pretty much covered up by hair. So I'm just moving down with the hair as I finish the volume of the back of the head. Just placing in the irises and that highlight. So here I'm just nitpicking with that highlight on the nose, just because the highlight on the nose is always super important, as it shows two different planes of the face, so you can learn a lot just from the highlight on the nose. Okay, so now we're ready to start painting. Right, so on to painting. I'm going to start with the right eye. So remember, you need to keep those highlights clear. So I haven't wet the paper because I want to make sure that my highlights are really sharp and crisp. What I'm doing with the eyebrow area, underneath the eyebrow, is I'm putting a higher concentration of paint in the areas that are going to be dark from side to side. And then I'm going to wet my brush, put it next to the ink I've just put down, watercolor, and blend that into the area of the highlight so there's more of a gradient. So I'm just adding a little bit of water there. I'm coming back in, picking up some of that color with a bit of cloth because I think I put it on a little bit too heavily. So that's just what I'm doing there. And now I'm going to move on to the other eye. And again, I'm starting with the eyebrow just because the concentration of paint is going to be greater there. And now I'm adding water to my brush to blend that in a gradient into the forehead, being very careful to leave that area of highlight alone on the side of the forehead. So moving down the side of the nose, I'm adding little bits of paint, the shade underneath the nose, and again with a wet brush, creating more of a gradient around those areas of concentrated paint. And I'm remembering these areas of highlights on the face, just very, very carefully, making sure that my paint doesn't run into them. There's going to be a little bit of a shadow in between the eyebrows, so I'm just getting that down. And a very, very, very dilute amount of paint down the bridge of the nose. Okay, so now as I work on this second eye, I need to remember it will be darker on the side facing away the light, but I'm still leaving that little highlight on the eye alone. So just putting down a more concentrated layer of that blue. I'm not really diluting it at all here because I'm just going to make that side of the face much darker. And paying careful attention to the shape of that little notch underneath the lips. That is another really characteristic part of the face that can tell you a lot about the shape of the face. And now I'm going to think about the shadow on the chin. I want this to be a smooth gradient later, so I'm just being really careful as I place that. One thing you can do to make more luminous seeming watercolors is to have really emphasized core shadows. Now, core shadows are the darkest part of something that's shaded. They're not the furthest away from the light, but they're where an object turns. So I'm emphasizing that. And I'm thinking here, as we move into the cheekbone, of creating a little gradient by leaving a larger highlighted area than perhaps there is in the reference, because I know I'm going to work within that. So I want to leave my highlights, better safe than sorry, leave a larger highlight, come back in later. And you always want to remember that little muscle on the side of the lips. That's the little area I've put in right now. And now moving in to add a little bit more detail underneath the lips. I'm going to get that wet brush to blend that in. So just getting some nuance there. And now moving into the neck. So what I like about this technique where you work with cool values into warmer ones is it takes the pressure off of thinking about color first of all. So you can simply think about volume and plotting out the volume. And an important thing to remember about skin is that skin reflects its surroundings. It's very influenced by what's around it. So by getting at least a value down before you start, which shows, like for instance here, the neck, I'm also going to do a bit of the background. It'll help you as you work in your painting organize the values in general as a composition. So with the hair, I'm just going to be thinking about the volume of the hair. You want to look at like the darkest parts of the hair first. I'm not adding a lot of nuanced or descriptive details here because they're not going to be a focal point of the painting. So really I'm just thinking about what highlights I'm going to leave alone, and then I'm using just vertical brush strokes to get in the background, just to get it in a bit more quickly. So you can already see here how the understanding of the face starts to change once we put the background in. Certain areas come into focus and certain areas recede in focus depending on where the highlights are. And the darker areas, this is the thing, your attention will be drawn to the lighter areas. So you can get away with abstraction in the darker areas or a lack of detail in the darker areas. But this means we need to be really consistent with our light values. So just maintaining those highlights is going to be really, really key as we move along the painting. Okay, so now I'm going to put down my first wash using Ecoline 374. So I'm applying a little bit more in areas that I think are going to be darker, like the side of the face. And I'm moving across the composition, again, because value is really determined by what colors are next to one another. So by sort of placing this across the face as I move, I have a better understanding of how to organize my paints. And the main rule here is I'm keeping those highlights super, super clean. I'm adding a little bit of yellow as I move towards the lighter places. You can do this with watercolors or more eco lines. But in general, I'm just very quickly washing this paint over the composition. And I'm moving it into the hair because hair is going to reflect some of the values from the face and vice versa. So once I'm done with this first wash, I'm going to get the hairdryer out and dry the whole thing before coming in with darker details with the Ecoline 416, so that sepia color. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with that sepia color, and I've sped this up, but in reality this whole part took about 16 minutes. I'm very carefully marking out the darker parts of the face, and I'm using water to blend some of that color into the paint that I've already got down. I'm focusing around the eyes because that's really where, the gaze is going to be drawn. And I'm remembering again to maintain those highlights at all costs. As I move into the nose, I'm going to use a little bit of a warmer color. I'm using that burnt sienna color 407. That I referenced. You can add just a bit of yellow to your sepia color. And I'm going to dilute that and just bring it down the side of the face facing us, just for a little bit of variety. So we want to avoid making our portraits look like mannequins, which is very easy to do. And one way to avoid that is to have a variety of color reflected on the face. So moving on to the hair, this part is always a bit more experimental because I feel like when it comes to watercolor portraiture, you want to leave certain areas telling the viewer that you're using a water medium. So there needs to be some sort of reason why, instead of using oils, which are fairly straightforward. You're using water media, which aren't. And a lovely thing there is the kind of ability to create transitions in watercolor. So to create these areas of really loose liquid and areas of more defined, concentrated detail. So with the hair, I'm just playing around a bit, leaving the highlights clear. You can get away with a lot so long as you leave a few highlights clear. And finally, I'm going to move in with that local value on the lips, using that peach color. You can use any sort of red tint that you have around with watercolors. Since I've already put down the values, I don't need to worry about contouring the lips too much. And I'm going to be really protective of that highlight. So finally, my favorite part, and you want to make sure that your painting is bone dry for this, because I'm going to come in with 416 mixed with a bit of indigo to make it really dark, to do the fine details around the eyes. So if the paper is totally dry, this won't bleed. You have to be super careful that your paper is totally dry, or after all this work, it's really easy to get ink that bleeds. And I'm just sort of creating more precise details around the eye. I'm going to come in with a shape. I'm going to put in the iris. I'm going to use a bit of a different blue, just a different watercolor I have around, cyan, for the irises. But you can choose any color you like. You can even use brown. And then I'm going to use the indigo for the pupils when this is finally dry. So this is my favorite part, where you get to just be precise and put in the fine details and kind of clean up any messiness within the painting. All right, so that's it. Don't forget to tag your work at soho_live_drawing. For more classes, either email me at soholivedrawing@gmail.com or visit our website, www.soholifedrawing.com. And thanks for watching.